Hey, what's up, guys? We are live. Just want to say thanks for tuning in on this. Like we said yesterday, this is allow us to test drive the equipment, the video equipment, and working out any snags as we make the transformation into streaming more content. So again, thanks for your participation. So like I said yesterday, we're going to be demoing out this machine. We actually did a quick dry run this morning just to make sure all the breakers, we're not going to blow any breakers, no electrical issues, and then just getting some mileage on it to deliver a better experience today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the components of the mix design. That's the focus of today's video. A lot of you guys have been following the channel and my work. Mix design is a big component of producing realism in your work. We'll discuss the what's and whys of why that is, okay? So, not sure, Aaron, is that picking up the frame over there? The mix ingredients on the left? All right, so you guys get a shot of that. What you're looking at is sand, cement, water, and an admixture called carbs, right? So sand and cement by itself puts out a pretty neat product at 2,500 to 3,500 PSI, depending on your ratio to sand and cement, and as well as how you placed it and your water content. And so really super important. What the carbs does is it turns into a stampable, creamy, sculptural mix. And I thought it was important to kind of mix it. I've never done a video where we just threw the ingredients in live. I figured it was going to create a authentic experience for you guys, as opposed to just mixing it up, take a break, come back, and it's all whipped up. There are some techniques that we're going to go over here in the sequence of how we mix these ingredients, because they're in the dry state. So first of all, let's talk about ratios. The ratio we're using is a 1.5 to 1. That means it's 1.5 parts aggregate, sand in this case, to 1 part cement. That's the glue that holds that sand together. The carbs dosage rate is we're dosing it at 12%. Now, what does that mean, 12%? 12% of your Portland cement content. So if you have 100 pounds of Portland, you're going to be at 12 pounds of carbs. If you're half that, 50 pounds of Portland, you're going to be at 6 pounds of carbs. Pretty easy math. Now, the good thing is if you're over or under a little bit, it's not going to blow it up. Meaning that it's unlike plasticizers and other admixtures, if you're over, sometimes that mix is thrashed, garbage, send it back, kind of a thing. So a little bit different here. You can dose carbs all the way up to 17%. One would ask, well, why would you want to do that? That's for overhead work. So if you need a little more stick, a little more grab, and you're spraying it pneumatically, that's where you can increase that dosage rate up to 17%. Okay, let's jump into the mix design. You guys picking that up? Is that, Aaron, is that picking up that audio next door, the sander? Or is it canceling out? All right, cool. All right, guys, if you guys can't hear that, there's a guy with a palm sander in the shop right behind us, and he's going to town on a piece of wood. So just want to make sure it's not affecting my audio. All right, so let's jump into this mix design. We're going to end up with 1 sack of Portland for this mix, 2.5 buckets of fine sand. You're going to see the sand as I disperse it. We actually set up a camera angle to show the grain size and whatnot. A full 5-gallon bucket of water to start. That's always a good starting point. That is going to vary depending on your sand, okay? And lastly, 12 pounds of carbs, which is about 1/3 of a bucket to 1/2, somewhere in that range, depending on how fluffy it is when you put it in the bucket. All right, I'm going to grab some water, energize the hose, and then we'll start batching. I am going to mask up for the dust particles, protect your lungs, especially in an indoor space like this. We don't have any, solid air movement. One thing to note while we're batching this up is other mortar mixers are a little bit different. This is a vertical type, in which if you start with all your water immediately, it's gonna drip out of here. This handles a chute that disperses the material. So the idea is to put sand in there first and add your water. That water is going to soak into the sand. It's not just going to dribble out of the bottom. So here we go. Let me grab that mask and make it happen. All right, energize this bad boy, got the cord. Okay, we're going to turn it on. It's going to be a little squeaky at first. Rotating. We'll start with some sand. So what I'm doing here now is I'm just keeping the material off the sides of the machine. Kind of a lubrication effect. All right, one more. So what I'm looking for, make sure it's not going to come out the bottom. I want that sand to soak it up. See, right there, we're kind of oversaturating it. It's kind of what I wanted to do. I'm going to add more sand now. Now that's the second bucket of sand that we're adding. So we got 2 in there now. And I still have a little bit of water left. Kind of slowing down, add a little bit more water. And now, next step is I'm going to add my Portland. Okay, I'm going to hold off on that half a bucket of sand initially, and it'll make sense later. It's like the bag was open a little bit. I'm going to flip it over. Actually, no, we'll just tear it from the bottom. It's got a tear device right there, as you can see. And I kind of let that drizzle in. I don't want any clumping or strain the machine when you blow a breaker. This is a 120 volt unit. So it's got some power, but you don't want to overload it. I'm gonna move the bag back a little bit to show you, we get a camera view. Of that process. We're gonna let that spin for a little bit. Dose it up a little more. Add a little more water. Then I still have the leftover water. You guys get a nice view. I'm going to stop the machine. I just want to go over a couple of things as I think they're very important. One thing is make sure your Portland's good. If there's clumps in it, you're going to want to pre-screen that so you don't have any in there. Secondly, if you notice, I started off with the right amount of water, and you can kind of see it's kind of mixing very fluidly. We don't have any dry patches or over wet patches of material. I still have about, little less than a quarter of a bucket of water. So having your stuff measured out is very important. The other thing too is the amount of water that I'm using is going to probably be different for you. My sand has been dried. When I first got it a few months ago, it was wet. So some sands hold more moisture than others. So you're going to want to do a dry run and understand what kind of your water content of your sand. Secondly, you can inch in on it. I'm starting with a bucket, but then I'm going to switch to the hose, and the hose I could mist, lightly mist, and control that even more precise. The other thing though is when you're spraying, you really don't know. If you got a newbie on the end of the hose, it's very easy to overdose and turn it into like a pancake syrup where it's running out. All right. So I'm going to flip it back on. I just wanted to hit those notes. What's up, Bert? How you guys doing? Brandon, what's going on, my brothers? Hope all is well. You guys probably seen this all before. Hopefully you learn a few tricks along the way here. I wanted to stop it. I'm gonna open up the lid and show you kind of the consistency as much as I can. All right. Pretty stiff, right? And it's pretty rich, and it's gonna be pretty rich. Reason is I'm still holding back a half a bucket of sand. This allows me to inch in on the mix. When you're ripping and running, I really don't fine tune it like that. Once you kind of get your mix contents, your water amounts, and you got it dialed in, that's when you can just go to town. For the 120 volt mixer, I would still definitely start with the water, the sand, and then pepper in the Portland. I think that's the way to go for this unit. Okay, I'm gonna keep mixing, rotate this, and I'm gonna add the sand and then the carbs. Let's do it. All right, that's spinning pretty good. You can see the consistency. This is what we got left. Add that in. Hold back a little bit. This is my first time using this mixer, so I'm getting it to learn it myself. Again, I don't want to overload it. All right. There you go. So that's it of the sand. All right, I'm gonna stop it. Open it up, show you what this stuff looks like. I don't think the sand that I just threw in is fully mixed in, but I wanted to give you kind of a play-by-play in here. So this is the consistency it's at right now. You can kind of see the slump. It's not fully mixed all the way, so we're gonna give it some time, but it's showing you what it looks like at this stage without the carbs in it. All right. Keep that clean. I guess, any questions so far, guys? Any questions on any of this stuff? This is a type 1, type 2 Portland cement. That seems to be my favorite. There's plastic cement and other cements out there. Portland, I find to be, for the price point, it works great at that sand to cement ratio and the carbs. All right, we're gonna drop the lid on this. Let it cook for a little bit. And if there's any questions, throw them up on the board. And while this is cooking, I'll go ahead and address those. All right, got a question that came up on the board. Why do we use a vertical shaft mixer? That's a great question. For me, it's preference. The mortar mixers that I used to mix in are the elongated ones, gas powered, so we can look at a couple of different bullet points. Gas is not going to work indoors. You can get the electric ones, but they're more for wheelbarrow types of outputs. They don't have the, when we disperse this, this is made to go right into a bucket. So I think that alone is pretty helpful. Otherwise, the other barrel type mixers, the mortar mixers, you got to disperse into a wheelbarrow. If you're going to do it in buckets, then you got to take it out of the wheelbarrow into a bucket. So to land that. This is kind of nice because you drop that bucket underneath that, and it's actually got a pretty cool little strainer that helps like strudelize the material, kind of breaks up the clumps if there's any clumps. And so yeah, that answers, I hope that answers your question. It's just preference more so than anything. Beautiful. We're 2 for 2. They also have an imer. There's an imer machine as well. I think it's a little bit bigger hopper. And again, it's preference. The other thing too is that these also do GFRC, glass fiber reinforced concrete. It's got the shear power to kind of mulch that up. If you guys followed that one video in which I did that GFRC tabletop, looked like wood with the live edge. I broke that. I had a Harbor Freight regular vertical shaft mixer, and I realized that was my first time doing GFRC, traditional GFRC. I quickly learned that well, I burnt up the machine, but I quickly learned the amount of stress and strain on that machine. So it is different. Columix is known for their paddles on how well that material's dispersed. So that's my 2 cents worth. All right, so let's turn this on. We're gonna let it whip up a little bit more, and then from there we'll add the carbs. By the way, great question. Hey, what's going on, Darren? So great question. I held the sand back for a couple of reasons. I was peppering in because of this disperse, how this disperses the material. What happens is it leaks water. So I was kind of building in succession, building that up. And the other thing too is I didn't want to overload it. I don't know how much strain this can handle. And for the sake of the machine, I did. I kind of walked into that, tiptoed into that. So great question, by the way. Just looking at the machine, I'm sure you could add all the ingredients, the water. As long as you got enough water in there, it'll kind of lubricate it. What you don't want to do is start with all the ingredients without the machine running. Throw some sand in there to get it going, as opposed to starting it way under load. Don't add all your dry ingredients and click the switch on. You're probably going to blow the breaker. All right. Mic is on, right? All right, guys, so I'm gonna pop the hood, show you guys where we're at as far as viscosity. Let me grab a pair of gloves. Actually, I'll put them over here. I have to keep stepping out of the frame. Okay. So, while the other thing too is we're indoors. If this was outside mid-July, you're going to want this a little wetter because the amount it's evaporating while it's mixing. Also, a lot of times this equipment gets hot to the touch. This is sitting in the sun. That's going to warm your water up. You know, you're going to get it to kick a little faster. So having a little extra water in there is probably going to be a good thing. So this is where we're at right here. The amount of water in it. Now that sand is still soaking in water, and we're going to temper this, and that's going to make more sense in about 10 minutes from now. After we put the carbs in, we're going to let it rotate for a couple of minutes, and then we're going to turn the machine off. That's where we're going to go to break. And what happens there is that the ingredients, including the Portland, the carbs, everything is kind of gelling together. And that's really important because if you don't do that and you batch right away, by the time you get that in the wheelbarrow or in the bucket or on the wall, you might be doing a project inside somebody's home. You're batching outside, it's got to go hit a bucket, up the stairs, through the hallway, and then you're applying. Well, that amount of time from here to there, you're going to get some evaporation. And it's actually called a false set, where it's not chemically setting, it's just setting because the ingredients are becoming saturated with the water. So, all right, drop the lid on this. And we're going to add the carbs. Probably add a skosh more water. And we should be in business. So this is putting out just a little bit of a mist. Helps me keep the machine clean around the top of that rotor. And everybody's going to be a little bit different. Some people are more heavy-handed than others. All right, we got the carbs. So, any questions so far? We just want to make sure, what do we got here? Yeah, it's a good point. Jason Brown, good point. Using ice water, big time in the summer months. Get a couple of cases of ice, throw them in your water, let them ice up. Same thing, cool down your machine. If your machine's been sitting in the sun, and same thing with the hose. This hose could be sitting in the sun. A lot of noobs, they'll come in and they'll fill up the buckets of water. You'll tell them, hey, Philip, give me three 5-gallon buckets of water. The problem is the hose has been sitting in the sun. You get them, they make a mix. Nobody communicated that. So you got a hot machine with hot water in there, you're really asking for problems. That's when the work becomes hard at that point. So good call, Jason. All right, sorry for the boring portions of the video. We're gonna let that spin a little more. We're gonna go to that slideshow. Any questions, feel free to throw them up on the board. All right, let's mix this. Okay, so this is where we're at. I'm gonna let this mix a little bit more. I wanna talk to you about ratios of sand while we have a moment of time. Basically, if your sand is coarser or you have a coarse sand, you're gonna wanna go ahead and increase that to a full 3 buckets of sand to 1 sack of Portland. Since this sand is finer in this case, what happens is you're getting more sand particles in a 5-gallon bucket as you would a coarser sand. Think about a jar full of marbles. Those marbles are stacked in a jar, and when those marbles get stacked in there, there's negative space between the adjacent marbles. So, and as opposed to a smaller particle getting more tightly packed. That's why I dial it back. So when you run the ratios, and we have YouTube videos out there right now showing 5-gallon bucket mix design. So it kind of gives you an idea of playing with those ratios just a little bit, depending on your sand type. Also, the gradation of sand is important. Some sands, like a silica sand, sometimes they sieve those out to just a 1 specific size. I'm not a fan of that. I do like some gradation to it. Wood grains, high textural, if you're doing a lot of vertical stamping, let's say you're not doing a lot of carving, this sand works great for that. You can slick it, stamp it, highly, highly impressionable, so, and creamy. All right, any questions? Or should we just keep this thing mixing? All right, I guess we're just gonna keep mixing then. Yeah, we'll rotate this a little bit, and then we're gonna go to like a 10, 15-minute break. And what's happening there is, again, all that sand and cement is just kind of getting happy and gelled together. That sand needs to hit its full saturation point. Then we know if we need to add water, all right? Okay, great question, by the way. We got a question came in about type 1, type 2 Portland cement. It is my knowledge that there's different grades of cements for different contents of what it's comprised of, like a different aluminum content, or excuse me, quantity of aluminum content, how alkaline it is. It is known, I think, that on the West Coast versus the East Coast, some are considered more to be hot, more concrete burns, because of the alkalinity in it is so high. So that's something to note. I've used type 1, type 2, type 3. I used it all. Each one imparts a different characteristic. Same thing with like Federal white Portland cement. If you're looking for a white color, they don't affect it that much. You know, plastic cement more so, or anything like that. So I hope that answers your questions. My thing is just do a bunch of samples, and you're gonna know what cement you like, how well it trowels out. The things that I look for when I'm you know, doing some test samples with different types of Portland cement is how well it trowels. Is this too sticky? And that's gonna vary depending on region, because where your guys are sourcing your Portland. They're not sourcing it from, you know, let's say somewhere on the West Coast and then shipping it way out east. They have kilns and kilters all over the United States. So it is gonna vary a little bit. But the easiest thing to do is run a small test. Hopefully that answers your question. Great question, by the way. Plastic cement, though, I will note, I didn't like it per se. It's darker in color. And I did like the way it troweled, but my colors didn't pop. It really affected that realism factor. Even though the carves is white, so having, you know, carves being white with a regular type 1, type 2 Portland gives me a nice soft gray output, like a 15% gray. Plastic cement, however, was super dark. And so you almost got to baste it with a light beige just to get the colors to read a little more. So super important. I think let's crack the hood on this bad boy and show you how this stuff is looking. So I can strike a line in that. I don't know if the camera picking that up, Aaron. So it's holding the walls right there. You can see that, you know. This is a nice consistency. So this is, now in 10, 15 minutes, now I'm gonna let this rest. I'm shutting the machine off, I'm gonna let it rest. It's gonna firm up. That's that delay set that I'm talking about. So we're gonna go to break, take 10, 15 minutes. We're gonna let this cook for a little bit, throw it on the back burner, and then we'll come back and stir it up. And then, yeah, if you got any questions in the timeout, bring them to the board and let's hammer through them. All right, guys, see you in about 10, 15 minutes. Great question. Truth Talker, that's a really good question. I bought this while we're in break. This was a piece of curb. We did add a live workshop here about a couple months ago. And I just the other day took it off the plywood. We actually formed this on plywood. I had to beat the heck out of it to get it off. I'll show you what the bottom side looks like, right? And again, I had to really smash to get it off. But this is fiberglass rebar that runs through here. What's nice about that, it just bends so nice. You see I snapped it off right there. And then it holds this together. So when you get the heaves and hoes of the Mother Earth moving, it's gonna stay together. Now, that curb that you've seen in the slideshow that you're asking, I did that monolithically, as well as this. But however, we did running it in layers. We built it up. We wanted to encapsulate the rebar first. I think it's very important that you get material around that rebar 100% tight and compacted. And when you go straight up and you're shaping the mud with your trowel to create these facets and geometry and texture, what happens is it's going to want to pull away from the rebar and develop maybe an air pocket. So yes and no at the same time. So again, first step, coat that rebar, make sure it's encapsulated with the mud. A lot of times in the summer months, it's going to kick quick, and then you can go back over it and shape and texture and carve that. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, we'll go back to break. And I want to add to that. We're still on break. This is still kicking. I love doing these live videos because there's so much information that can be kind of extracted as opposed to just because I've been doing it so long, sometimes it's easy for me to gloss over certain topics. But this is the fiberglass rebar that we used to help form this. This stuff is extremely flexible. You know, it really, and it doesn't hold a memory like standard steel rebar. Super cool when doing these curbs, and a lot stronger and lighter. I think it's a little more expensive, but steel prices are rising, so keep that in mind when you're quoting out your project. And the bottom side is just the pegs. So these are the pegs that hold that rebar to create that snaky, let me see if I can hold it upright. Create that snaky geometry, just like so. So, super cool. So my guess is, so if you're a newbie, I would definitely just focus on coating that rebar. It could be the same day. It doesn't have to be like a traditional hard coat, scratch coat, then carve coat, where you wait the second day. A lot of times the material is only coming up 8 inches at the max. Again, biggest important factor is make sure that that rebar is encased. That's steel or fiberglass. Some guys in the curbing industry are just using, you know, steel cable, sometimes rebar, all thread, anything they can get their hands on, but this stuff is strong. And I used to live in an area in the freeze and thaw, so we built everything for freeze and thaw environment. It should be able to heave and hoe and not snap, fall apart, or kind of get disjointed or disconnected. All right, guys, we're gonna go back to break. we're back. Quick question, what's the next step? The next step is to disperse, but what's even before that? We want to see what this feels like. So a word to the wise, if you got employees, before they disperse, have them come over and check it with your fingers. You almost got to feel it. Looking at it's only going to get you so close, especially if you guys are putting this in wheelbarrows and moving it around and going up on a ladder, scaffolding, or whatever you're doing. Even pneumatically, if you're applying pneumatically, okay? Because even pneumatically, you're going to want it a little wetter. Reason being is when you put air at the nozzle, or the jet nozzle, you're dehydrating the mix slightly, so you're compensating that for additional water. All right, let's pop the hood on this. Okay. Okay, now look, I don't know if you can see that, but it's quite firm than what it was. Still nice consistency. You know, nice snump, you know, makes a nice ball. It's loose. I like it a little looser than tighter. And also the amount of sand. When I stroke that with my hand, I don't know, Aaron, camera picking that up pretty good? Down a little bit? Right there? Okay. So when I'm stroking this with my hand, I can really get a sense on how creamy it is, how much sand content. If I, back rub that, which again, FYI, I use that in wood grain a lot, just the palm of my hands, just to kind of disturb that cream a little bit. The other thing too, this has a very unique microfiber in here. Believe it or not, those fibers almost act like wood fibers. So when I do backstroke that to get some resistance built up, I've got some mud on my back of my hands, and I can really kind of scar that and get some texture going, kind of like the overlay stuff. So that's kind of a good benchmark to say, all right, bring it over. If it's super hot out, I would have it just a little looser. By the time you get in the wheelbarrow, what you'll find is when you start putting the mud up initially, what happens is it's almost, it can be too wet while you're putting it on initially. By the time you get to the bottom of the wheelbarrow, what happens is it's going to be perfect. So you just got to understand how that mud is behaving. All right? So we're going to spin this. I'm going to set the buckets up. We're going to show you how to disperse it. So hang on, let's do it. Just straight these edges while I can while I'm in here. Keep your edges nice. Anything up here? This machine does a really nice job, I got to tell you, of scraping the sides. The rubber flaps that we installed, it is an extra piece of equipment that they offer. Certain mixes don't need those rubber flaps. This mortar mix does. Okay, we'll drop the hammer. Oh, FYI too, just a heads up, machine won't start with the lid open. So that's a pretty common safety feature, right? Drop the hood. Just like so. Now, I'm gonna grab a bucket and I'm gonna load up. You'll see how it comes out over here. Something about right there. See how it strands out? Kind of cool feature, so it breaks it apart. So back to the original question, somebody actually asked a question earlier, vertical mixers. This is what's kind of nice about it. If I'm doing a project and I'm a one-man band, depending on how many people you have on your crew, or you're just a one-man warrior, I think this is a cool feature. You take a bucket, it's still in here, you don't have to remix. You can let this sit for a little bit, especially in indoor environments. I think is pretty cool. So I do like how it does it's got that catch system on the bottom. It's kind of a grate, and it helps break that material apart if there's any clumps in there. I think it's cool. It also has a strain catcher. So if there is a ball of material it'll actually catch that before going into the hopper. Pretty cool, especially for pneumatic applications. All right, let me get a small piece of foam real quick. I'm gonna put a piece of foam on here, and I'm just gonna trowel up. I think important to show what characteristics that I'm looking for out of this mix. So let me grab that real super quick. We live, Aaron, right? Okay. Let me, I'm gonna just stick this on here like that. That camera gonna pick this up? Okay. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna throw some mud up on here and show you what I'm looking for out of a mix design. I think it's so hard. We've been doing videos for a while now, and it's hard, like, you never get that complete video as opposed to just doing it live and letting some of these anomalies happen right on the screen. And how do you adjust for it? Okay, so how well the mud strokes? Does it hold an edge? Is it too sticky for my trowel? How well it closes up, especially for vertical. You don't want, like, I like tight, dense mud. I'm gonna rotate that, something like that now. Does it fade to zero? Can I get it to, you know, support that fade, especially if I wanna do scallops, if I wanna do plane changes? And this is all indicative how much water, what's your sand to cement ratio. The carbs is fixed. So this is what you're getting out of that material. That's why you're able to do a lot of this manipulation that you want and still be able to close up and perform not only aesthetically, but performance-based, freeze-thaw environment, underwater, things like that. So this isn't really a demonstration on like stroking the mud. We're gonna have other videos that are gonna address that, but this is what I'm looking for. So when that mud's dispersed out of here and, you know, brought up on a scaffolding, I need to be able to perform this level of pliability, trowel performance. So super important. So any questions on that? Any questions, guys? Now's the time. And I guess while we're here, the gentleman actually brought up a good question earlier about the curb. So if you were doing a curb, and let's say you had your rebar, you know, sticking out, I'm gonna rotate that a little bit. Let's say that rebar is coming out. What we did was we just hand shaped with our hands. You can see almost get a wood grain there, see that? We would shape this with our hands around that rebar, and we actually put stage 2 accelerator in there, and that made that mud kick. We were indoors, it was only 65 degrees. That mud can kick within under an hour. So pretty cool in the field if you need that, if you're gonna attack that project like that. But if you got 100 feet of curb, the project changes. I necessarily wouldn't do that like that, especially running a full batch, because you need to get that mud batched out of there and then placed. That takes time. Think about the time that it's gonna take to place that mud as opposed to ending up with some waste. You'll end up having maybe 2 buckets worth of mud that didn't get used up because it kicked off too quick, okay? So, you know, it should hold its form. how well it creams up. So if your sand's too big, it's going to affect that performance. Down a little bit. Yeah. I'll tell you what. I wonder what we'll do is, I'm trying to think would it make sense to, save that for another video. What do you guys want to see as we close this thing out? That's my go-to mix design. Sometimes I'm a little higher in the sand, sometimes I'm a little less, depending on what I'm doing. Wood grain textures, I love the fine sand. You can really get some high realism and then resolution, how crispy those details are. All right. Not seeing any questions, so I guess that's it. Guess we can wrap this thing up. All right, beautiful. Got a question. Okay, that's a great question. I like the mix to rest because the sand is going to hold water. Sometimes it takes function of time to permeate that sand particle to get it fully saturated. So what happens is, if I don't let it rest, by the time I get it up onto the wall, that sand particle, because time has passed, that sand particle is still soaking in water. And by the time I get it up on the wall, it's not as fluid, not as trialable as it was. Now, certain sands are going to absorb more water than others. There's been times, especially in the West Coast, I've got riverbed sand. Put that sand in there, what happens is, when I mix that, it just kicks like super fast. Outrageously fast. It's not a chemical reaction. What happened was that sand robbed all the water out of that, because that sand particle is made up of a different compositional makeup, and it just had more area to soak in water. And the sand out here has been beautiful. It holds very little water, if any. I mean, if you recall, this mix only took a bucket of water, 5 gallons. So on the West Coast, I've been up to 7 to 8 gallons of water. And that does add to the shrinkage cracks because that sand's going to hold water in. So Darren, great question, but that's the gist of it, is I want it fully, that sand particle and everything fully saturated with the water content that it needs, so I don't get a false set. Do I use fiber? Great question. I use fiber on the hard coats. So we've got a piece over here to my left that we've hard coated just the other day, and that gets fiber added to it, and that's a 12 millimeter alkaline resistant fiber. It's not a polypropylene or a PVA. It is a true AR glass fiber. Now, in the carve mix, which we're dealing with, there's a fiber built into the carves admixture. That admixture is comprised of a multitude of different ingredients, one is which is a specialty fiber in here. Camera's not going to be able to pick that up, but when you stroke it, you can see them. There's thousands of them in there. Cool thing about it, it doesn't impact the carving experience. I've messed around with mixes way back in the day, and putting polypropylene in there and some PVAs. What happens is they mess around with the experience, and I just felt like it took away from the realism. So if I would carve something out, or I was looking for a specific detail or point of interest, sometimes I'd run into a clump of fiber or something that was fiber in that area. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So what else, guys? I'm going to throw this back in the bucket. This has been a super fun video to do, guys. Like I said, we're just getting our heels in on this live. We are experimenting with different camera angles. There's a lot of technology that goes into this. Again, a big shout out to my graphics guy. Big reason why we're able to kind of reach you guys to your home. And we're going to continue to refine this and get better. If you can share the YouTube, videos, that'll help gain more exposure. Right now with YouTube, we're not really getting the thumbs up, which is totally fine. That's okay. But the downside to that is YouTube's not going to show the material. They're looking at it as it's maybe insufficient or maybe not a good representation of a video that they want on their platform. So they're gauging their algorithms off the thumbs up. So if you're watching a video or leave a comment, would greatly appreciate it. All right, any good questions, guys? I'm going to get this material out, and where are we at, Aaron, on time? Hour and a half. Wow, time went fast. Let's see here. We got another question. How well does the carves handle the heat? An example, fire rock or fire pit? Great question. I do not. Let me break down my answer. I do not put carving mix in direct flames ever. Two things. It is still Portland cement based. I'm sure it could handle the heat if it was cured out properly. The reason why I don't is because of the black char. It's going to make my work. It's going to take away from my work. Is it natural? Sure. I would end up with an isolated fire pan or propane unit. If you want to do it, I've done wood burners before, actual wood. I just buy the metal carcass, drop it in. Now here's one thing to do note with that, is that when you cut that pan out, you shouldn't have any foam. If you're using foam core, you shouldn't have any exposed foam. That should be all encapsulated with at least 2 inches of carves going around that perimeter. So super important on that. Heat rises, so the foam and the crete, they don't really get any heat. It's just going upward. So that's the 2 cents on that. Hopefully that answers your question, Jeremy. Okay, all right. Well, if there's any more questions, and this closes off, just go ahead and leave them in the bottom. This video is going to be posted, so feel free to leave a question in there or a message, and we'll answer it as they come in. So, all right, guys. Well, I'm going to clean up, get ready for the next seminar here, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.